Remarks. Thanks you all so much for coming. George did call me early this week when we found out that the scheduled speaker, Joe Fisher, wasn't going to be able to be here today. I must confess, I feel a little bit like 38 Special. You guys thought you were coming to see the Rolling Stones, and you got some no-name band instead. But it is my honor to be here, and I was excited to be here and be amongst all the collegiality. It's great to see so much friendship here. And I think one of the first times when I joined the mayor's office, one of the first events that I worked with him at was actually when he spoke to the Kiwanians Club in probably June or maybe early July in 2011. And so it's great to be back here. As you all recall from that address or any other address when you've seen Mayor Dean, you know that he has three pitches that he says that he focuses on, that as an administration we focus on every day: public safety, public education, and economic development. I'm only fastballs. The economic development is the only pitch that I throw, so I'll just focus on that one today. But each of these things are related to each other, and so I did want to spend just a moment talking about economic development as it relates to education and to public safety. As Ted Sanders talked about, Chicago's got a reputation for crime, and nobody wants to go to a city where there aren't safe streets. And with the investments that we've made in Davidson County, we can say that we have a really safe environment. So the police force is now the largest police force that it's ever been. We've added 2 new police precincts that both improve the coverage area around those precincts, but also reduce the coverage area of the other precincts. And these investments in infrastructure and in people have paid off tremendously and improved public safety. Some of you, I think, probably heard the mayor talk about the homicide rate in 2011 was the lowest in 45 years. And I am pleased to report that the homicide rate in 2013 is even lower than that figure. And so that's a product of many factors. Great work by doctors saving lives, but a tremendous amount of credit goes to the police force for the work they do, both proactively preventing crimes from occurring in the first place and then helping to bring those to justice who do commit those crimes. But it's not just homicide, which can be a volatile figure. Major crimes, all major violent crimes so far this year through the end of August are down 7.1% versus last year, and that has been a steady trend of declining crime. And so companies want to come to cities that have safe streets, and that's how it relates to what I'm doing today. Similarly, education is vitally important. No business wants their employees to be having to choose between what kind of schools that they go to. They want to go to a place that has great schools, both for their employees and the children of their employees, but also so that they can have a pipeline of good workers coming in. And there have been some signs of success. The TCAP scores for public schools that were released, Algebra 1 showed a 10-point improvement last year, and Algebra 2 showed a 7-point improvement. There is still a tremendous amount of work to be done on public education, and that battleship does not turn overnight. But there are good signs of hope in the area of public education, and I think that we're doing a good job of making the investments needed, and that progress needs to continue. Investments in innovative approaches to educating our children that we're undertaking, and so we certainly appreciate the work of Kiwanians and other organizations to invest in public schools. It's parents being invested, businesses being invested, organizations like this being invested. It's something that we do as a community. And I think in America, we all believe in equality. We don't necessarily believe in equality of outcomes, but we believe in equality of opportunity. And the only way to have equality of opportunity for all of our children is to have a high-functioning public education system. And that's important not just for those kids who only get one chance to go through 3rd grade, but for businesses who need workers, for people who want safe streets. And so continuing to invest in public education is vitally important. But I am not the mayor's education advisor, so I'm not here today to talk about education. But it is something that I'm passionate about, obviously. As George mentioned, I'm a product of public education here in Nashville, and my 2 kids, I have 2 boys who are in 4th grade and 2nd grade at Aiken Elementary, are both going through the public education system right now. And so I am personally invested in the success of our education system. So people sometimes ask me why I decided to make the transition 2 years ago to join the mayor's office and how much difference there is. I was working with Brian Williams at Hands On Nashville at the time and was serving in some other nonprofits, the Center for Nonprofit Management and others. And I loved the work that I did at Avondale Partners. I got to work with interesting business leaders, helping companies to grow, raise capital, advising on mergers and acquisitions. And that was a great experience for me. But there was something that was continuously pulling me towards public service, whether it was serving on the board of the Hands On Nashville or working on political campaigns. There was something that was pulling me there. And quite honestly, the way I got the job was I asked for it. So Alexia Poe, who was my predecessor in this role, went to be the communications director for Governor Haslam after he was elected. And I saw in a Nashville Post article that there was an opening in this office. And so I called up a friend of mine in the mayor's office and said, this is a little bit out of left field, but I'd love to talk to you guys about that. I knew the mayor like 10,000 other people knew the mayor. I don't know that he knew my name, but I knew him, obviously, by reputation and the tremendous job that he'd already done putting our city in a great position. And that was a team that I wanted to be a part of. And so I asked for it. And so in May of 2011, I joined the mayor's office of Economic and Community Development. And we've had a pretty good run, both before I got there, it's got nothing to do with me, both before I got there and since that time. Nashville's at the top of virtually every ranking. Best place to start a business, best place for entrepreneurs, best places to visit, and that comes not just from the things that are done in a particular year, but that recognition is built over years and years, a legacy of good government and wise investment, both to keep the business environment friendly and also the investment of community members like you in making Nashville a hospitable place to folks who move to town. People want to go to a place where they can join a club like the Kiwanians Club and quickly gain a leadership position. And that friendliness and business-friendly environment and personally friendly environment is one of the really distinguishing characteristics of a place like Nashville. And it makes a difference when I'm out recruiting businesses. And we have had success. Some of you may have seen the announcement. Last month we announced that UBS announced that they were going to bring 1,000 new jobs to Davidson County. We've now publicly disclosed they're going to be in what was formerly known as the Region Center, 315 Dedrick. And UBS is a great example of a company that's had a legacy in Nashville. So UBS acquired Payne Weber in 2000, which had just acquired J.C. Bradford. So UBS is the legacy of J.C. Bradford, which, as you all certainly know, is one of just the leading economic and financial services companies in the country, and have been headquartered here in Nashville and had a great legacy. UBS acquired that company, built on that legacy, and continued those operations, certain of those operations here in Nashville. But it was this year that we announced that they would be adding 1,000 people. And these are back office jobs, but they're high-paying, good, attractive back office jobs. So for any of you who are out looking for employment, UBS is a great employer. And these are great jobs. So it's finance, it's accounting, it's IT, it's marketing. And these folks in their support center will be supporting UBS's operations across the country. They did a nationwide search of where to put these folks and chose Nashville because we have a low-cost environment, business-friendly environment, and we have a tradition of supporting businesses that come here. We announced in July that Aramark, which does uniforms and does food service at venues, some of you may have seen them at football games, but Aramark similarly announced that they would be bringing over 1,000 new jobs to a similar type of role here in Nashville. And so those are back-to-back month with 1,000 job announcements. And so we've had some success with these large corporate relocations. But it's really been across the board. In 2012, the Nashville market was the #1 market in the entire country for percentage job growth. I should say #1 market over 1 million people. So North Dakota, Will, I think you mentioned energy exploration. North Dakota's going through a boom right now from energy exploration, so they had slightly better job growth than we did. But for any market over 1 million people, Nashville was the #1 market in the entire country last year, according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics for job growth. And so that success has spread broadly. Mayor Dean had a line at the announcement that UBS was coming here that he recognizes that government doesn't create jobs, businesses create jobs. Business owners, business leaders create jobs. And that, by the way, as a side note, is not just a line. There are actually about 650 fewer employees in Metro government today than when Mayor Dean took office. We've trimmed many departments within Metro government, virtually every department, with the exception of public safety and education. And we've consistently increased funding for both the police and fire, but also for education. And so, your budget is sort of like a pie, and that pie is going to be a certain size, and you have to divide it up how you see appropriate. Mayor Dean's chosen to continue to invest in public safety and education. But overall, the pace of growth of government has been far less than historically has been the case. And so we've shrunk the size of government, reduced the number of employees, but tried to maintain a business-friendly environment and a high quality of life that will continue to attract businesses to Nashville. And so, again, Mayor Dean said, government doesn't create jobs, businesses create jobs. And so we recognize that all we can do as public officials is to try and create a business-friendly environment that attracts companies to want to locate operations here. And we've done that through a number of mechanisms. We've done it through economic incentives, which I'll talk about in a second. But we've also done it through blocking and tackling. So we're in the process of creating a one-stop permitting shop right now. So there's one place you go for codes, for fire, for stormwater, for water, for grading. So there's I heard it referred to recently as one throat to choke when you can't get your permits. I prefer to think of it as one shop to stop at when you need your permits, but we're trying to make it easier and faster for businesses to get up and running, and that is an economic development tool that we are aggressively using to make it easier. Mayor Dean asked Terry Cobb, who's the head of the codes department, to move over to my office a little over a year ago. And Terry, when I described Terry, I don't know if any of you know Terry Cobb. He's been the head of the codes department for 15 years or so, but has a career predating that in development himself. So he's sat on both sides of that table. And Terry's been around, good old boy. But when I introduce him, I say, have you seen the movie Pulp Fiction? And people will generally say yes. I say, so you remember the Harvey Keitel character in Pulp Fiction, Mr. Wolf. Terry Cobb is the Mr. Wolf of Metro government, except he doesn't wear a tuxedo or hang out with supermodels at 9 o'clock in the morning. But what he does do is solve problems. And he does that very efficiently and effectively. And so if you're a business and you're trying to get up and running and you're running into problems with the fire marshal or the codes department or permitting, come talk to Terry Cobb and I can provide you contact information for him. He has helped expedite a number of businesses in getting up and running faster. But he's not just solving problems on the back end. He's also preventing them from occurring in the first place. So he's gone through and working with the heads of all the departments, all the Metro departments, to streamline the regulatory process. So you don't have, the fire marshal telling you have to build a building one way and the stormwater department telling you have to build it another way. And we've resolved many of those discrepancies, which frankly unnecessarily got in the way of people who are trying to just open a business and get going selling their products. Whether it's anti-aging products or whatever it is, you need to be focused on that and not focused on how you get your permit. And that's extremely important to Mayor Dean. So we've put in place a number of steps and processes to do that. Another one's the pre-submission process. So if you're building a building, before you pay architects, and I love the architects, I hope I'm not offending any architects in the room, but before you pay architects tens of hundreds of thousands of dollars to draw up a building that doesn't conform to code, you can draw out a very simple sketch and bring it into the pre-submission process and meet with the heads of many departments, and they can tell you, okay, look, this building looks great, but you're going to need to turn it this way, or we're getting ready to release new regulations, so make sure you use the new regulations, not the old regulations. And again, it's something to help streamline the process so you can get up and running more quickly, more effectively, and at lower expense. And so all of these steps, the steps that we've taken to try and make it easier. I mentioned that we've been fairly aggressive in offering incentives to attract jobs. We have. Mayor Dean has been extraordinarily aggressive about attracting new business to Nashville, and we think that we've done a decent job at that. I mentioned Aramark, I mentioned UBS, but there have been a number. Oberto Foods is the #2 manufacturer of beef jerky. I'm sure you all enjoy their product. But Oberto Foods is based in the Pacific Northwest, chose to open their first operations facility outside the Pacific Northwest here in Nashville. And so it's a broad spectrum of businesses that have chosen to relocate or to expand their operations here in Nashville, and that's for a variety of factors. But one of those is incentives, and we've very methodically approached business opportunities where there's a benefit not just for that company, but for the X factor that they're going to create in needing more copies or needing more dry cleaning services or whatever it is to try and bring additional businesses here. But we also, Mayor Dean thought it was very important not just to offer incentives for these large projects, whether it's building a $250 million data center, as HCA did, and 155 new IT employees, but there ought to be some incentives to try and get small businesses to grow here as well. So in conjunction with 2 Metro Council members, we passed through the last budget 2 separate programs. I'll just spend a couple minutes talking about here because it may be relevant to some of you in the audience. But these are small business incentive legislation that were included as a part of the last budget. There was $1 million dedicated to this program. It's divided into 2 separate components. One is the Small Business Jobs program. And so for large organizations, the incentives that we have to offer, if you're a company and you bring 500 or more employees to Davidson County, we can write you a check for $500 per employee that you bring to town. And that statutorily is limited to those projects that have 500 or more employees. It's intended to be used to attract large business development here. Mayor Dean thought it was appropriate to have something for smaller businesses. And so we wanted to create a program that had very rigid outlines to it so that there wasn't subject to who I thought deserved it or didn't deserve it. We want to remove all political judgment from it. But we put in place a program. So if you're a small business that has 100 or fewer employees and you add 20 or more employees in a 12-month period, and those 20 or more employees make more than the average wage for the Nashville market, which is $41,810, then you are also, like for the large jobs program, eligible for a grant of $500 per job that's created. And so this is going to be for smaller businesses, obviously those that are growing quickly. I mean, for a company that has 60 employees, adding 20 high-wage employees in a year is a tough hurdle to match. But we wanted to try and narrow the criteria and really support those businesses that are growing quickly and adding high-wage jobs for Davidson County employees. So that's the first piece of it. The second piece is to help redevelop blighted properties. And so if you are a property owner that either buys or owns a property that's in a blighted area, which we've defined as a redevelopment district per MDHA's designation. So if you have a property that's in a redevelopment district that has a $1 million or less real property value, and you make $100,000 or more in improvements to the exterior of that building, then we'll write you a check back for 10% of the investment. And the idea here is to encourage businesses to invest in commercial properties in blighted areas to help encourage redevelopment, improve the overall tax base of those blighted areas, and help redevelop parts of Nashville that have not benefited from the tremendous growth that's existed for many of the folks across the county. We understand the whole county is not the same, and we need to really invest in some of these blighted areas and encourage redevelopment. And so those are 2 initiatives that we've put in place. We've worked with a number of the members of council, Councilman Matthews, Councilman Maynard in particular, Councilman Tiger, in creating this legislation, and we continue to evaluate it and look to make improvements and investments in that. And I should say, we know that we don't know what we're doing. So we're out there every day trying to learn more from other people and copy great initiatives that exist in other jurisdictions. So if you have ideas or things that you notice that we're not doing well, we could be doing better, or they're doing great in Indianapolis, or something you see that we're making a mistake, I encourage you, please get in touch with me or someone in our office, because we know that we can get even better. We think things are going well, but we know that we can make improvements to get things going even better. So as the economic development guy, I should talk about 2 major projects that we have. The first is the Music City Center. As you know, that opened at the end of May, and I hope that you all heard that there were 1 million room nights that were booked for conventions going through that convention center before it even opened. It has been tremendously successful, and not just because of the fact that it was built and opened at the right time. But given, and I think Mayor Dean would not say this, but I give Mayor Dean a tremendous amount of credit for it. Because the building was built when it was built $50 million less expensively than if it were to be built today, based upon construction costs, labor costs, concrete costs. Any of you are obviously more expensive. And so I think it took a tremendous amount of political wisdom and foresight to push through the largest public investment project in the state of Tennessee's history at a time of absolute economic uncertainty. But because we did it then, we put over 7,000 people to work in the depths of the recession. We built the building more cheaply. It came online just as the economy was recovering. Companies were beginning to have more conferences again, and the momentum is carrying forward to this day. We've also benefited from the fact that the financing expectations for that building have exceeded what we had projected. So today, we're approximately $20 million ahead of projections for the revenue. And I hope you all know that none of your tax dollars are going to pay for the Music City Center. It's being paid for by hotel and motel taxes. It's being paid for by rental car fees. But those revenue streams are $20 million ahead of projections. So there are more people coming to see it. There's more people visiting Nashville. The building got built on time, under budget, and that has been, so far, knock on wood. Yeah, I'll hit Joe. A tremendously successful investment. The other, sort of on the other end of the grand scale spectrum that I want to talk about briefly is the Entrepreneur Center. Metro has supported the Entrepreneur Center by providing a space for them to go into at the trolley barns as a neighbor to Hands On Nashville. Sorry, Brian, but we're providing that rent-free to the Entrepreneur Center. And also by providing ongoing operating support for the Entrepreneur Center. But it has been a big part of a renaissance that is occurring in small business growth. Now, Nashville has always been a place for entrepreneurs. Approximately 23% of businesses are sole proprietorships or small businesses. That exceeds the national average by about 5 percentage points. So Nashville has a long legacy of supporting entrepreneurs, but the Entrepreneur Center is really helping our community take that to a new level. There have been more than 60 companies that have gone through and come out of the Entrepreneur Center. Those companies have now raised in excess of $30 million and today employ over 400 people. And so whether it's an energy business or a cosmetics, consumer product business, digital media business, healthcare IT business, the Entrepreneur Center is helping people launch businesses. And that has been a really important factor for the continued growth of our community. As you all know, there are approximately 21 colleges and universities in the Nashville market. And my mother was a classics professor at Vanderbilt. So I like to say before Nashville was known as Music City, USA, and Senator Henry, she still talks about how you wrote to her in Greek. It made a huge impression on her. But before Nashville was known as Music City, it was known as the Athens of the South. And that is a tremendous asset that we have as a city. 100,000 college students in the Nashville market. But the key to retaining those bright minds is making sure that we have the kind of environment that supports them. And any of you all out there who are young or have kids know that in this generation, a historically low percentage of people graduating from college or in the 18 to 25 demographic have driver's licenses. They want to be able to ride mass transit. And so I believe Paul Ballard came and spoke to this organization recently, so I won't rehash Mr. Ballard's comments on the AMP, but I can say from an economic development standpoint, I think it is tremendously important that we have a very attractive mass transit system in this city. And I'll just, thank you. I'm going to give one anecdote about that to tell you why. So there are site consultants. These are people who are hired by companies to advise them when they're considering relocating or expanding their operations. And these people's whole job is to help companies decide where they're going to go. And about a year and a half ago, I was in Chicago selling the Nashville story, doing a pitch with the Chamber of Commerce and others. And in one of those meetings, we met with a large firm, and there were about a dozen site consultant specialists in that room. And probably 3 or 4 of them had done projects in Nashville, so they knew the market well. 3 or 4 of them had looked at Nashville, but their clients had not chosen to operate here. And then 3 or 4 knew very little about Nashville. So I go through the Nashville spiel, and as you may be able to tell, I'm pretty passionate about it. So I'm giving the story. and then ask them questions. What are you guys seeing across the country? What are they doing well in Omaha? What are they doing well in Austin? I'm a big believer in plagiarism, by the way. So if people are doing good, smart things elsewhere, I want to copy those, adapt them to Nashville, and not reinvent the wheel. So I'm asking them questions about that. So it's a good conversation back and forth. And at the end of it, I said, okay, so given what you all know about Nashville, what is the single most important thing that we need to be doing in Nashville? And 11 of the 12 of them said, invest in mass transit. And to be honest, I was shocked. I was completely blown away. These are people, some of whom knew Nashville, and so I thought maybe they knew that we had bad mass transit, didn't have a history of mass transit in the city. But some of them didn't know Nashville at all. But what they said consistently across all of them is, for most of our clients, it is a checklist requirement that a city have a viable, attractive mass transit system before we even consider it. And so we've been able to get as far as we have with the mass transit system that we have. And we're doing great. But as the city becomes more popular, more populated, more dense, we have to have a viable, strong, attractive mass transit system, or else our city will be choked by growth. I mean, we're choked by the traffic. And won't be able to continue to grow. So from an economic development standpoint, and I know that may not be the most persuasive argument for some folks, but to continue the tremendous momentum that we've been able to build in this community, I believe it's vital that we have a strong, attractive mass transit system. And so I hope that you all will do your own investigations, look into the AMP, listen to Ballard and others, and figure out what we need to do. But having a strong, attractive mass transit system is going to be critical to that 18, 25-year-old computer programmer who doesn't want to have a car, doesn't want to have to drive downtown, doesn't want to have to pay for parking, doesn't want to have to spend $4 a gallon of gas, but wants to be able to get around town efficiently and effectively. I won't even talk about the argument of all the Vanderbilt students who we want to take the AMP back and forth so that they don't have drunk driving on Friday nights. But there are many other reasons to support it. But just from my area, economic development, I think the AMP is an important part of it. So